We all know Battlefront 2 had a disastrous launch. EA tried to tie the game's progression to randomized mechanics in order to frustrate the player to cough up enough money. Objectively, it was the ditching of a linear progression system and a shift towards a totally random and based on luck system that broke the game's grind. Players could not reliably progress their classes, but instead had to rely on the RNG nature of those damn loot boxes. The progression was tied to star cards, but only in terms of numerical values and not the actual effects of the cards. The card effects were only indirectly linked to progression, that being you needed the cards to be a certain level for the entire class to progress, and so it was incidental specifically which card you had equipped and only mattered as far as the level that it was. It's not as though having a specific card leveled you up faster, but rather that you had leveled up cards at all. Cards you might not even use. Flash pistol. However, looking back at the criticisms, it seems star cards got caught in the crossfire during the justifiable backlash, and I think now, with the power of hindsight, and especially so long after the new progression system, we can see that the concepts of these cards were probably too harshly criticized. With that, I would like to evaluate the criticisms that were directed towards the cards and their inclusion and rebut them, as far as I think they are misguided. The point states the reason why the cards and the levels on top of that exist was to create an abundance of some sort of in-game resource EA could monetize. Their inclusion in this way was linked to them being easily monetizable and therefore was a greed-based implementation, as you could throw them and other currencies linked to them into loot boxes and rely on the frustration of the RNG nature of it all to force payments or an unbearable grind. This point is understandable. It's easy to see why anyone would be cynical about the inclusion of so many cards that can also be leveled up in the climate of the initial monetization. However, taking a holistic view of the development, you'd be able to clearly spot that the cards are just an evolution on the design of Battlefront 2's predecessor, Battlefront 2015. 2015 featured many star cards. In fact, they were in lieu of any classes. These could be equipped, slotted, swapped, and yes, upgraded as well. The more you progressed your overall ranking game, the more cards would become available to you. Once you had unlocked them, you had the ability to upgrade them for a hefty sum of credits. White cards were fresh cards and black cards were upgraded versions. So it follows that when making a sequel which boasted around 2 to 3 times the amount of content in many areas, that it would be double the amount of levels that were found in the previous game, from 2 levels to 4, a natural progression. Also, more cards were created for this game, even some that were created by transforming aspects of traits in the previous games into star cards. Every single card has a design that follows the philosophy of the design that can be found in 2015's Battlefront. Therefore, the many cards and levels were a natural consequence of an expanded sequel. They are a core philosophical design decision, not merely additional fluff. The fact that they survived the progression rework is evidence of it. Monetization post-game or not, they would have made their way, how they are now, into the game. Countless videos, posts, and angry tweet threads have been posted by new players condemning the cards, saying they bring an unfair advantage to those who have them. A very us versus them mentality and source of their frustration. They believe it does not allow them to be competitive in the beginning of their journey of playing this game. A belief of an unfair advantage, propping up veteran players and rendering a new player's skill ineffective simply because of an acquired upgrade. If the cards were not there, the playing field would be level and allow true skill to win encounters. The main reason for this disparage is simply time played and skills learned. It happens in all games. The more you play, the better you become, especially in online PvP games. That's how metas are formed. The advantages you get are present. There's no denying that. But I refuse to believe they are significant enough to account for the perceived disadvantage. First of all, new players with 1 or 2 cards equipped have taken me down plenty of times. Secondly, I can tell who the new players are by the way they play the game, what with all the bunching up, funneling down corridors, and popping their heavy miniguns at every opportunity. Third, most cards are very situational, and the ones players equipped are usually adapted to how they play. No nerfs have ever been called for cards by the wider community. Some have been nerfed, but out of the intuition of the developers themselves, and they have never been drastic. I think this points towards the fact that the cards are not tied to an overall advantage. Once you learn the ropes, you'll see the cards as situational boosts fitting your playstyle and not as an all-encompassing boost to your characters. This argument is sound, as there are cards that increase damage effectiveness of side equipment, reduce the heat of blasters, implement damage reduction, increase melee damage, and so on. These present a clear statistical advantage in a one-on-one gunfight. The more you have, the better off you are, especially if you equip only boost cards and ability cards that are buffs on the default abilities. These make gunfights won on an unfair advantage. It expands overall as well, because if one-on-ones are more difficult to win, the result is more deaths, and thus less opportunity to push the enemy back, and so the cycle continues. I agree. I mean, you can't argue with the numbers, only put them in context. DICE was well aware of what they were doing when designing and interconnecting all aspects of this game. The cards are designed in such a way to encourage the use of abilities continuously, regardless of performance, hence the boosted cards. This is because the game is an ability shooter, meaning the players are relying on using all their tools during a match and not just their weapons. Some cards can change up your abilities and some boost them. Some can even give you passive bonuses in order to help you more effectively use your abilities without the fear of being eliminated. The game modes, maps, and meta is designed to produce a team vt encounters way more than 1v1s. This is an environment where abilities shine and also allow a space into which heroes, vehicles, and reinforcements can be introduced. When an enemy players are statistically better than you, either because of cards or vehicle armor or hero weapons and abilities, you're forced into changing your approach to take them on, and so is your team. This encourages changing of playstyles, focus on accuracy, making use of flanking routes and other map features, and overall approaching the game like a Star Wars battle simulator. Overall, yes, the cards you acquire by progressing do give you an advantage one-on-one. If you're unwilling to disengage from these fights, you'll most likely lose. Thus, most Battlefront players have adjusted their playstyle and embraced all aspects of this game to level the playing field. The cards were ultimately just made to tie into the insidious progression system at launch. The best cards are all tied to passive buffs or improvements of the class's base abilities. Not much thought was put into making them unique, and different cards were there to add filler to encourage more collecting. I've seen this floating around and I don't know where it comes from. Sure, at the surface level it can look like everyone with maxed out card only uses improved varieties of base abilities, or one of the passive cards. However, take a deeper look and you can see the majority of the player base use the cards to change up their playstyle. It just so happens many people have changed up their playstyle in the same way. Assault Trainee, the Iron Grenade, the Detonite Charge, the Barrage, the Supercharged Sentry, the Officer Squad Shield, the Trip Mine, and the Personal Shield are all deviations from the base class abilities. Just because you don't see as many flash pistols, homing shots, iron torpedoes, or repulsor cannons, it doesn't mean that these are the cards that magically count as changing up a playstyle. The depth of the cards mixed with only 3 slots is meant to encourage experimentation and has worked. Players use filler cards, players use commonly used ability changer cards, and yes, players use passive boost and base ability improvement cards. No one style dominates, and even if it did, it would be no reason to get rid of the cards but maybe change them, or maybe just change the meta. I've been excited to experiment with the new star cards ever since DICE announced a sequel to Battlefront 2015. It was disheartening to see them linked to the horrible monetization through EA's pricing mechanics for them. But once that was removed and they were more easily accessible, I was excited to try them out once more. So it was a bit of a shock to me to see some of the initial reviews slam the system, but even more so to see it happen post progression update. Although I think the criticism has always been a bit weak, and I feel as the community can almost instantly tell that takes offered up by returnees and new players alike are disconnected from sustained play. I mean, after all, most of the criticisms are usually shared by at least some aspects of the community, but not with the cards as a whole. It just leaves me scratching my head as to why some would feel this way, especially after returning to the game and praising its recovery. I don't know, maybe they just need a, well, this aspect is still bad point to balance their review. It just sucks to see it applied to a core game aspect that was directly expanded upon from the previous game.